And we are live. Welcome to this edition of the Fun V Tailgate presented by ThunderblogSports.com, a part of the Bullpen Cart podcast feed. I, of course, am the G-Man, Jordy Cannell, and I'm joined by both sides of the coin. And I'm not just talking about with the Super Bowl. I'm talking about with both of my co-hosts for much of the podcast time. Mr. Greg Piatelli and Matt DiStefano, the prophet and the truth, finally battling it on the podcast. Gentlemen, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, obviously. I mean, how could I not be in a better mood? Our boys are going to the big game 2 weeks. It was an incredible weekend to watch. So just overwhelmed and great.
That is great to hear. Greg, how about yourself?
Jordy, it's electric intro as always, per usual, not surprised. The perfect voice for radio and podcast. I've said it for years. You got there, but looking forward to it. Excited. Get things going a couple weeks. It was a nerve-wracking Sunday for some and a blowout Sunday for others, and I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. But we'll, as you all know, Greg's Patriots are facing our Birds in the Super Bowl 52, a rematch of the 04 Super Bowl between the Patriots and the Eagles that featured D-Mac from Greg's alma mater of Syracuse, and Tom Brady is still at the behind under center, as you will, not behind center. But we'll start with the AFC Championship game, as that was the first one. The Jaguars came out to an early lead, but the Patriots, proved why you don't doubt Belichick in the second half. Is that right, Greg?
Honestly, it's, you and I touched on coaching last week in the pod. It really, you can give Brady and the offense and everything credit, but at the end of the day, it's the fact that the Jaguars coaching staff and offensive coordinators, changed their game plan in the second half and played perfectly into what Belichick and Matt Patricia, the D coordinator, are trying to take away. The Patriots, what they do on defense is stop your number one option and make you beat them other ways. And the first half, Blake Bortles and the Jaguars passing screen option offense was the difference and the reason why the Jaguars were controlling the play. And then the second half, the Jaguars got conservative, started to run the ball, and played perfectly into the Patriots' hands. And coaching is a huge part in the NFL, and that was proved again on Sunday.
I still think if you're Doug Marrone, you're kicking yourself for taking that knee at the end of the first half. It didn't really seem like it was costly, but I mean, even if you go down and kick a field goal, you still lose, but at least it doesn't show that you're starting to take your foot off the gas pedal, and that's fuel that you don't need to give Belichick, I don't think.
I mean, I would say this, though. I mean, I know it's a tough loss for the Jaguars, but in terms of what I think their future holds, it's got to be incredibly bright, regardless of what happens with Blake Bortles, who personally I think should get another shot there. I mean, he's a high pick for a reason. He had a pretty good game here. He didn't come through really late in the end, but other than that, I mean, he had a pretty great day. And that defense is they're really
unreal.
Good. Right. And they just got Brady'd. I mean, that's what happens. They dominate for the whole game. And then at the end of the game, he does what he does, and he makes guys like Danny Amendola look like superstars without a Rob Gronkowski, which I think is really, really impressive because that's their best weapon. I'll tell you what, I would now I know I'm giving a lot of positive to the Jacksonville defense here who lost, but I would take Jalen Ramsey on my team any day of the week. So I hate him because he's on the Jaguars and he talks a little trash, but man, I'd like him as a cornerback on my team. So the future is really bright in Jacksonville, which I like. I mean, they're another team. That AFC South division, by the way, went from being a laughing stock of the league to probably one of the better divisions in the whole National Football League this year.
Hilariously, it's not hilariously, kind of sad enough. Andrew Luck had nothing to do with it.
Right, they're probably the worst team in the division, right?
Yeah. They're just terribly built, and hopefully he comes back soon, but they still need a lot of other people around him. But it's not about the Colts right now. Patriots doing what they do, and Greg, was there ever a doubt in your mind?
I mean, honestly, I'd be lying if I said no. You know what it was? It was the Deion Lewis fumble that the Patriots try to, as they often do in the playoffs, don't do any trick plays, and then playoffs come around and they throw out all these trick plays they don't do all year. And they almost got away with one. Deion Lewis or Brady to Amendola back over Deion Lewis, and he fumbled. It was a strip. If the refs had it right, it would have been a touchdown for Jacksonville in terms of they stopped the play and everything. But that 3-and-out after the fumble that the Patriots forced, that sort of started to regain my confidence. But when that fumble first happened, I thought the worst. And just to touch on Matt's point there, Jacksonville is a team that you're talking about a team that lost to the best team in football since 2001. So you can't really knock a team that, like Matt said, is so young that's going to be good for many years to come. Regardless, like you said, of what happened with Blake Bortles. And it was nerve-wracking, Jordy, and I was nervous. But that, as soon as that 3-and-out happened, I was starting to regain some faith, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other big thing is like the Patriots defense, their strength is their back end. So, they proved it. I mean, the Stephon Gilmore diving tip to a guy that was almost open enough to score a touchdown there late. And I think it was 4th down on that play was incredible. And that back end, the whole defense, they just bend all game and they kind of stiffen up late. And Greg, to your point, I mean, that's what this coaching staff does so well. They figure out what you're doing well and they make an adjustment mid-game that shuts you down. So the only positive is the Eagles have a lot more weapons than Jacksonville. So hopefully Dougie P, salt in his hair, can figure that one out. But the defense does typical Patriots team. They bend all game and then they stiffen up when they need to late. So just a great win by arguably the most successful dynasty in the history of the National Football League. I think we're getting close to that at this point. They kind of have too many dynasties that, when they played us the first time, now they're playing us now to kind of cap off another dynasty run here for them. So a scary look that we're going to have to play them. I mean, of all the teams you had to pick, man, but I'll take it.
Yeah. It's almost like to nerd alert a little bit, but how Star Wars tries to mirror itself. It'd be for the Patriots. It'd be funny that they cap it off with the Eagles on the both ends of the trilogy.
Right.
And there's a tweet out that I forget who I saw it on, but they beat an NFC South team in the Panthers and the Falcons the year before they played the Eagles in both Super Bowls, and then they beat an NFC whatever the Rams West. And Seahawks, the NFC West. Man. So it's even
is it
more
the same order. Is it like the same gap of years too? Like they win and a year off, win, or would it be rather?
That's exactly what it is. Win, year off, win.
Oh man. Ugh. Well, that's the same thing with the Eagles of how they beat the same two teams to play the Patriots. They just beat them out of order. A lot of history repeating itself here.
I don't like it. It makes me nervous.
Well, the scariest one that's held true for other teams is, it sounds ridiculous enough, is the jersey color rule that the Patriots. It's crazy though, because the Broncos, if they wear orange, lose, and they have in every single Super Bowl. If they wear not orange, they win, which they have. The Patriots, when they wear white, same thing, they've won, and when they've wore blue, both times they played the Giants, they lost. It's crazy, and I think they did the one they went to against back in the '90s against who'd they lose to? The Cowboys.
They lost to the Packers, but they also beat the Rams in 01 when they wore, because the Rams wore white that year.
Did they?
Their first Super Bowl. The Patriots wore blue, but I think the stat with the white jerseys was something like the last 13 out of 14 Super Bowl champions have worn white or something. Really like that. So,
nuts, crazy stuff.
Anyways, let's move on. Let's move on to the NFC. Let's get the Eagles talk going, so we can discuss some great a great football team.
Yeah. So if you didn't watch the game, it started off with the Vikings just marching straight down the field. The Eagles elect to kick the ball. The Vikings come right down and score, and Matt, you and I were texting. We were freaking the fuck out because it looked like they were putting everything together. The defense was getting dummied, but then Big Dick Nick comes out. He puts together an okay drive. They end up punting, but starting to set the seeds.
Well, I mean, I was even more nervous because not only did they march down the field with basically, I was actually reading about say they used a little trickery, and we tried to match their trickery, and that's what screwed us up a little bit defensively that first drive because they were running on us, they were moving guys around. That led to the play action touchdown, which was basically a joke at how easy it was. But then the next drive, Nick Foles makes two pretty good throws. Little behind Torrey Smith, but he probably I know a guy got onto him. Maybe it was pass interference, but hits him in the hands. He's got to catch it, and then Trey Burton jumps out of bounds on the third down play for no reason at all. Yeah. Never seen anything like that by a professional football player. And I'm thinking, here we go. Vikings are going to get the ball back. They're going to march right down the field, score again. It's 14-0 against this great Vikings defense. But instead, the Eagles defense does what it's done all year. And I know Foles was brilliant, but I thought our defense just shut down a Vikings offense.
Incredible.
Yes. A Vikings offense that, it has some playmakers in Stephon Diggs, Thielen, even Jerick McKinnon. And they just put the clamps on a team that had played really well throughout the year. And it was awesome to watch.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. For those that didn't see the play, Chris Long comes in, pretty much he doesn't bat it completely because Case Keenum gets the pass off, but he throws this complete duck. Patrick Robinson comes in, gets it. As Chris Berman said in his glorious return to NFL Evening Countdown, Mr. Robinson comes right down the field, knotted up at 7, and from there it was all Eagles. And it, like you said, Matt, the defensive line, the way that they can run it almost like a hockey team, just rotating guys through. They put the pressure on them and really just shut down a lot of different chances for the Vikings to do anything. They wouldn't score for the rest of the game. Quite a show. And kind of with we talked about it a little bit with the Pats and with this return of the flea flicker. I mean, holy shit.
Yeah.
It ended up working in this one after a number of unsuccessful attempts. And Nick Foles, he looked great, but yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the defense played out of its mind. Just great coaching all around. Jim Schwartz has been great with the defensive coordinating, but Doug Peterson called one hell of a game for offense. Really looked into what Nick Foles has done well back in 2013 when he had that incredible second half of the year, and really integrated it in on Sunday with how they did. And it was just, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that it was a blowout. I thought it would have been a lot closer. It hit right on the over under number. So I think it went just under. So Greg, I was right on there. Not a big deal. But yeah, it was quite a night in Philly after that.
Yeah, no, the outsider's perspective, if you will, that interception was at the first quarter.
Yeah.
Touchdown was for me the point where I thought the Eagles, we're gonna roll from there. I know that was early on, but the Vikings, you're talking about a team and Case Keenum that hadn't turned the ball over in terms of I'm pretty sure he hadn't thrown an interception for however many weeks in a row, but that interception followed by the stop right away and then touchdown by the Eagles the next drive is, for me, that was the most deflating thing for that Vikings defense. The Vikings, I don't want to say got lucky the week before in the Drew Brees shootout between him and Case Keenum in the fourth, but it's one of those things where the Vikings defense just you could see them sort of put their heads down, if you will, and start to get and feel the stress of having to carry the team all year. Whereas the Eagles defense and something the Eagles have been doing all year is getting a big lead and then turning around and just stuffing stuffing the opposing offenses with their pass rush and their corners. I didn't realize until obviously watching this game how good their corners are at staying with their receivers. They don't necessarily have to make a ton of interceptions, but they certainly force the quarterback to look at a second and third option, which allows the pass rushers to pin their ears back and just get after the quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, they played incredibly well. That was the one thing that I got nervous about. We talked about that last week. And, I mean, they shut down those playmakers that Matt was talking about, Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, Jerick McKinnon. He could have been the X factor in it, just the way that he's so dynamic from the backfield and catching running backs, can really cause a lot of trouble. We saw what Todd Gurley did to the Eagles earlier this year. But I mean, they stepped it up and everybody stepped it up big time. The offensive line played incredibly well too, which I was incredibly impressed by.
Yeah. So I wanted to say, no one's talking about how since the playoffs have started, Big V hasn't been a point of discussion. The offensive line has played great, but more importantly, he has stepped up. I mean, that's a great pass rush led by Everson Griffin and Brian Robinson and that group, and he played amazing. So it's good when your offensive line isn't in the news. That usually means they're doing a great job. And I tell you, even with Big V, we might have one of, if not the best offensive line in all of football right now with the way they're playing. And no one's talking about our guards and Kelsey. I know that Kelsey's a Pro Bowler, I think, or an All-Pro, one of the two.
He and Lane Johnson are all pros.
Gotcha. And Brandon Brooks and Wisniewski is back, and he was out for a couple games, and I thought that really affected the team. So his return, I think, has really stabilized them as well. But like I said, Big V's impressed me because I'm not hearing anything about him. So that's what you want. You don't want to hear anything about your offensive lineman. So he's been nothing but smooth.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I mean, they just played so incredibly well. And I mean, it'll be awesome to see how this all goes down. I'm nervous. I'm always nervous though about the Birds. I'm not a little stitious. I'm superstitious. So I'm gonna same clothes. I don't need to be in the same place because I was in two different locations for both playoff games. Matt, you're going to be going, but I almost want you to sell your ticket and go to some mountain resort because you've been at mountain resorts for the two playoff games. I mean, Greg, you can just do the opposite of what you've been doing for the playoffs. So go ahead and do that. But
no, listen, I got a question for the both of you. All the talk from the media all week has been, and all playoffs has been how good the Eagles are and how good they've looked and how awesome they are and blah, 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 and this and that, and the best team in the world. What is the weakness of the Eagles? And I don't want the cookie cutter Nick Foles ESPN answer, Jordy. I want something real.
I still think it can be the secondary. I mean, the one thing I think too, because Gronk's definitely going to play, I think the fact that you have they have a great linebacking core, but Gronk just changes it and changes the game. He's one of the best, if not the best tight end ever. And the fact that you have to probably double cover him the whole game just changes up a little bit. I mean, you get 2 weeks to kind of bring that up, but like you were saying, the cornerbacks specifically don't have to go for picks 100% of the time, but at times they can let up, they can let up more yardage than they should, or maybe give them enough space to make that. So I think that could be a huge sore point that Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels could take advantage of with Gronk.
Yeah, I mean, I that would have been probably one of my, just the secondary in general would have been what would have been the first thing I would say. But I do think the weakness that really kills us, and he's been so good at it all year, but the games we've struggled, I always think it's the offensive play calling. And I call it the Andy Reid streak that Doug Peterson gets, and it's calling way too many passes in a row. Yeah. What made this game so special was our balance between the pass and the run. It allows Foles to get into a rhythm. That to me it's a weakness that rears its head in a couple losses this year. So I think on offense, it's the play calling.
We saw it a little bit.
He's been great. So.
Yeah, we saw it a little bit in this game too, where he would balance it out, but sometimes you had a little bit longer of a third down play, 3rd and 7. Nick Foles did an incredible job, almost Carson Wentz-like on third down, to really complete a lot of those and keep drives going. There were a lot of plays. Zach Ertz really was a big factor there in being able to complete drives. But, I mean, if it does get streakier, as you were calling it, Andy Reid-esque, it could present a lot of problems, especially if they're scheming for that and taking that away. The stellar third down player, taking away Zach Ertz or Alshon or whomever has been, the big target, which has been nice about Nick Foles and really with the Eagles in general this year, is that they've been able to get so many different receivers involved. And even on Sunday, they didn't get of everybody involved in terms of both receivers, tight ends, and running backs. So, I mean, we'll see how it goes, but that's a great choice, man.
No, and I love that answer. And it's funny because the Patriots' biggest weakness, in my opinion, is getting off the field on third down defensively. And that's something that they've struggled with the entire year. Their defense forces teams into these third and long or third mid to long, and they just allow a first down, no problem, willy-nilly. And that's been a weakness all year. So if the Eagles can convert on third like they did against the Vikings and they've done all playoffs, then, I can see the Eagles offense just wearing down the Patriots defense and not even giving Brady a chance. And that's really how you beat the Patriots.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great point. And, the problem with the Patriots that they can't get off the field on third down because they don't have really, I mean, if you look at their defense, we're used to having them have a couple big names, but their linebacking core and their linemen aren't as, with the injury to Dante Hightower and the loss of Chris Long and Rob Ninkovich and some of the other, Chandler Jones, Jamie Collins, they don't have as many stars up front on that defensive front and linebacking core. James Harrison has played great for them, but that's their problem. They just don't have that on the front seven, and that's where I think the Eagles can get after them. A lack of a pass rush is not something you want against any quarterback, but you're playing into Nick Foles' strength, which is standing in the pocket and not getting him off his spot. So I think it's going to be pretty important that they protect Nick as well as they did against the Vikings.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, if you get both ends of the two-headed, really the stable, but the two-headed front part of the running back core of Ajayi going off and LeGarrette Blount just kind of pounding it in, it'll be exciting. I mean, we'll see how it goes, but we can definitely get into this a lot further, and we'll probably have some more talk next week with prop bets and all that good stuff. Unless you guys have any other thoughts. I know, Greg, you had a couple trivia questions you wanted to ask us.
Yeah, no, I mean, I in terms of reviewing the two games, I think is job well done. Not to pat ourselves in the back, but I did have a couple questions in terms of Nick Foles and sort of why he hasn't had a shot in the NFL. You talk about what he's done since he's replaced Carson Wentz and what have you, but reality is you're talking about a guy who is better than anyone on the Browns, better than, I would say the bottom 8, 9, 10 quarterbacks in the NFL that are starting for teams. Yeah. And Nick Foles hasn't had a single year where he's been a starter for all 16 games. And for me, I was a little surprised and shocked that a guy who has proven that he can put up numbers based on that 2013 or 14, whatever year he was with the Eagles, and Chip Kelly, proven that he can do well and have success in the NFL and be a Pro Bowl starting quarterback. Why hasn't he had that chance or shot throughout the NFL?
That's a good question. I mean, I know he had those up and down seasons with the Rams. I mean, Chip Kelly traded him away in that trade to get Sam Bradford. And from there, I mean, he played in a Rams team that with Jeff Fisher just kind of went up and down, and he, with Case Keenum, kind of flip-flopped in terms of starting jobs. He got hurt a little bit, I believe. And then, I mean, there were articles that came out about it. I mean, he wanted to retire from football. They drafted Jared Goff. I mean, he was really down in the dumps, and his wife kind of helped them out there. He called up Andy Reid, signed with the Chiefs, played behind Alex Smith. I mean, that's why he's still in football. So, I mean, good on Howie Roseman for convincing him to come back to the Eagles. I mean, which is another part, we can talk, with the Eagles, that Howie Roseman did a great job building this team throughout the season. But, I mean, it's crazy, though, like you said, that he didn't really get an idea of in 2016 of where, or really of, a team that needed a quarterback, especially because you hear with so many people going down, because I'm looking at it here. He got released on July 27th, 2016, and was signed by the Chiefs around a week later, August 3rd. So, I mean, just signed as a backup, but I mean, other teams are probably looking for quarterbacks there. I know you draft people, you want to maybe see what you can do, but I'm
looking for a first-hand account from two Eagles fans who watched him in 2013, and then after the trade in 2014, were you jazzed about it? Were you pumped about it? Like, how could you, as a fan base, go from a guy who did so well the year before to being like, yeah, let's ship this guy out immediately?
Well, it was crazy.
Go, Jordy.
Yeah, I thought it was crazy because so that 2013 season, the Eagles go to the playoffs, lose to the Saints. 2014, you come out, they go, I think it was 10-6, and don't make the playoffs because the Cowboys win, and all these different teams obviously had better records except for the Panthers, I believe it was, who won the NFC South. Nick Foles got hurt though in week. Mark Sanchez started for Chip Kelly, did all right, but the Eagles really fucked up and didn't make the playoffs. He decided then that he was really going to just put his own touch on the team. So it was kind of I was shocked. I remember, I don't think it was the same day as the LaShawn McCoy trade, which I remember Matt and I were at a Flyers game when that happened, and we were sitting we were grabbing beers when that news came across. And I remember both of our jaws were on the ground when that happened. Losing Foles, though, I mean, it was something you couldn't really believe. I think the Eagles traded draft picks to get one, I don't even know if they got one back to trade two, which I thought was weird because Sam Bradford kept getting hurt. So I was a little down on the trade. I mean, and then it was just.
So I mean, I would love to hear Matt, but you're telling me they traded him because of a concussion?
Kind of. I mean, it was kind of more Chip Kelly's ego. I know, Matt, you have a little bit more of a higher opinion on it, but hey, let's get your thought.
Well, I mean, first of all,
Chip Kelly.
How can you? Here's the thing: you can hate Chip Kelly if you want, but if it wasn't for Chip Kelly, we'd never have Carson Wentz.
That's true.
That's the truth about it. So, and I thought, well, he did some crazy stuff, and I really didn't like cutting Deshaun Jackson. I didn't hate the LaShawn McCoy trade, and for this reason, I'm not a big fan of drafting running backs high. I think you can find good running backs throughout. There's many ways to find good running backs in the NFL, and while there are some great running backs that were drafted high, like McCoy, and Ezekiel Elliott was drafted high, you can find gems in the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth round. So I'm a big fan of. I don't think your running back needs to be a top talent to win the Super Bowl anymore. But in terms of Nick Foles, I tend to believe I'm a quarterback realist, and I think you can see his limitations. He doesn't throw particularly well when he's on the run. He doesn't have very quick feet. He moves around the pocket better than I expected this game, but we've seen his limitations before this. To me, it's like the NBA, and I don't know why every team doesn't copy the process, because if you don't have a top quarterback, it's very difficult to win in the NFL. All the stars have to align. Now they're aligning for the Eagles this year. But if you look back, most Super Bowl quarterbacks are one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. That's why the Patriots have been to a record 10 Super Bowls now, with the last 7 or 8 conference championship games, I believe it is, because they have a great quarterback. Personally, I think Foles is a high-level backup who can come in and drive a game plan if you need him to. I don't know if he's a starter in this league, to be honest. I know he had a great game last week, and I love him for it, and I love him as a backup. But if I'm the Browns, why am I signing Nick Foles? So what is he doing for my franchise for the next 10 to 15 years? Their team's not good enough to win a Super Bowl right now, even with. So, now I look at a team like the Broncos and think, okay, well, maybe Nick Foles makes sense there, but how much are you going to pay him? How much are they going to pay like a Case Keenum? Do you think Kirk Cousins deserves $20 million, in this league? So I guess I eye test Foles because his stats are okay, and I see a quarterback that has clear limitations but can perform when put in the right system. That's why I don't think he's been a successful starter outside of Philadelphia. He hasn't been much of a successful starter, and he had the one great year, but I thought he regressed the next year, and that normally happens. Like, I don't expect Carson Wentz, whenever he comes back, to have the same success on third down and the same amazing plays. I hope he does, but I don't expect that because most quarterbacks tend to revert to even the high-level quarterbacks revert to the same mean, for the upper echelon guys. So 27-2 was amazing, but guys get film on some players and then they start to struggle. Would I be mad if Nick Foles was my starter? Yeah, if I was the Browns, I wouldn't want Nick Foles as my starting quarterback because I think you can get a young guy who might be better in 5 years. That's how I look at it. But he wins a Super Bowl. He might get traded and signed by somebody if he wins a Super Bowl here.
No, it's a great answer, and I think you definitely hit the nail on the head in terms of rebuilding versus building for the future versus just taking a guy to be serviceable for a year or two. And I think it's a valid argument to, like you said, why Kirk Cousins hasn't had a full-time contract and hasn't gotten that multi-year deal, because you really need to evaluate, is this guy good for what we have or is he good for the future and long-term? And I think that is a point that definitely is overlooked. Or was overlooked.
Let me ask you, Greg, would you call it I almost call it the Joe Flacco effect?
Right?
Yeah,
I mean, you're right. I mean, it's definitely one of those things where Joe Flacco and even Blake Bortles in the same argument.
I was going to say him,
yeah, the same argument that we were talking about earlier, or the Chiefs quarterback Alex Smith, and are those guys that deserve those multi-year deals that Joe Flacco got a contract because he won a Super Bowl, and is he really a guy to be the face of the franchise? And I mean, you talk about Aaron Rodgers and Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and Drew Brees and guys who have been with the same team for so long. Brett Favre, guys who lasted at places, and it's one of those things where you really need to, like Matt said, invest in the future and find a guy who can be a staple, even if it's for 7 years. So like McNabb in Philly, McNabb won how many NFC championships or took you to how many NFC championship games? Was he a guy that could sustain that top level and bring in ticket sales and everything like that for a long time? So it's a great point, and I definitely something that
a big case in point to it is Brock Osweiler. I mean, he got the big money, and look what he's doing now.
Yeah, I mean, that was gonna be my next question. Does Nick Foles? I'm glad you brought it up. I mean, that couldn't have planned that better if we really wanted to. But does this Nick Foles Eagles-led team sort of remind you of that Brock Osweiler-led Broncos team? Obviously, you don't have Peyton Manning coming back for the Super Bowl, but does it remind you sort of that? Lose your starting quarterback and turn around and have a great defense and supporting cast on offense.
Yeah, I think it does. I thought coming out of the Falcons game that it reminded me a hell of a lot of it. You and I talked about it a little bit last week. Trade the all-star caliber wide receivers for the stable running backs, and that's basically your offense. Even though you have some solid wide receivers by the Eagles here and a great tight end. But that defense, I mean, it reminded me so much of it, the way that they play, the swagger they carry going with them. I mean, it reminds me a hell of a lot of that Denver team from 2 years ago.
And I would even add to that the Denver team had an elite defense. Eagles have an elite defense. So there are a few exceptions where mediocre quarterbacks win Super Bowls for their teams. Now, Peyton Manning came back for that Super Bowl, but you watch that game, he was Nick Foles or worse. His mind was still there, but his body had pretty much given up at that point. So he basically game managed that game to a victory. So yes, I think it was incredible that Brock Osweiler led him there, but I think it was their defense that really won that championship for them. even more than their offensive weapons. I think the Eagles have better offensive weapons than that team had. So I think they're loaded at pretty much every position. And we didn't even talk much about the wide receiver core really showed up after that first drive for the Eagles. So we'll see what happens. But the other difference is, though, that the Denver Broncos weren't playing the New England Patriots.
Right.
So we'll see. But yeah, I want to point that
true.
out.
No, and listen, I mean, it's what the Eagles have been able to do all year and able, to withstand an injury like that. Remember when Brady went out towards his ACL in the second game or first game of the season?
Wasn't the first play?
It was first drive, not the first play.
First drive, yeah. It was 08, right? It was coming off of the 18-1 year.
Yeah, right after the loss. 16-0 year, Jordy. 16-0. Yeah, right after that year and all the records and tears his ACL, and then they still win 10, 11 games but don't make the playoffs. But the fact the Eagles were able to continue that torrid pace, for a couple of weeks. Obviously, the Rams game was late in the year, but they beat a Giants team who sucked, but at the same time was.
I'm gonna play spoiler.
I mean, yeah, but they were playing hard somewhat towards the end of the year because everyone started to realize they're playing for their jobs at that point because they knew there was going to be a new coach and even a Raiders team that still had a chance to the playoffs. And then obviously that Cowboys game was, rest all our players, but that was a terrible game to watch. But it don't want to blow up the Eagles too much, but at the same time, you have to give respect where respect is due. And my question here, to shift it back to the team of destiny, if you will, from an outsider's perspective, start with Matt and then head to Jordy. The Patriots run that they're on, the Patriots sustained success, if you will, in the Belichick era. Is that looked on by others as, because if you ask anyone in New England or anyone close to or who likes the Patriots, you're talking about the greatest of everything in every single category. And, I couldn't tell you, people talk about, this is natural for us. Like, no, there's no huge celebration. There's no crazy videos because it is what it is. And this happens every year for us. No big deal. From an outsider's perspective, try to compare it for someone or New England fans who are listening or anything like that to different dynasties. I was thinking today when I thought I was going to ask you this question, like the Jeter and the 90 Yankees or, even some other, the Jordan Bulls, if you will, just sort of that run of success for sustained years. Is it looked on as like these guys, it's so annoying, or is it looked on like with respect or you have to admire what they're doing?
Well, I think it's looked on as annoying right now because they've been blocking teams who, for years that probably deserve a championship, like the Falcons, like the Seahawks, who should have another championship. They've been blocking teams, the Rams. They've been blocking teams in their own division who obviously will hate them forever because the Jets, Dolphins, and Bills have been smoked since Brady basically took over. I would say if you compare it to some other dynasties, I believe it is the most impressive. Maybe Jeter Yankees, but I think the reason I think of that is two things. One, in the NFL, it's a one-game series in the playoffs. Every game could be your last game. That's hard to do. And two, there's a lot more people on the roster. It's not as star-driven in terms of, like, for example, in basketball. You take Jordan's Bulls, you take LeBron with the Cavs and the Heat, you take Golden State right now. If you have the best player or one of the top couple players in the world, you're probably going to win a championship. So I think it's so star-driven in the NBA that it's all focused on getting one guy on your team. That's what the Sixers have been trying to do. So I'm not discrediting how amazing those runs have been because they had the greatest players. But Tom Brady might be the greatest. I think he's the greatest quarterback of all time. Do I think he's that much better than Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning in his prime, Drew Brees? No. I think the team around him, though, has been built so professionally and incredibly against a tight cap structure in the NFL that I'm more impressed with their sustained success over almost 2 decades than I am with any other dynasty that I've come across. But I think baseball is an interesting one. I'd have to do some research, but that's another one that's really tough because we see how good teams are, and in the playoffs it's totally different. But I think their sustained success is incredible.
Yeah, no, and Jordy, I want to hear your point too, and I'm certainly not asking this just to hear the pump up of the Patriots, but I really am curious, like what other people think, because you ask anyone around here, and you can't get that unbiased, fair opinion, if you will. But I think it's a good point, Matt, that you bring up about the cap, because I think what helps baseball, or I guess hurts, is the lack of cap and the fact that they can spend as much money as they want, and that sort of the age-old adage of the Yankees would buy everyone good, but at the same time, they had those guys. I mean, as Red Sox fan, but they had those guys who they build around, and Bernie Williams and all these guys who are homegrown and came up throughout the system and sort of live that sort of, this is our team, we're going to build off these guys run that the Yankees had, and that's why for me, I think baseball would definitely be the best comparison. But sorry, great points, but I agree with the baseball point. Jordy?
No, and I agree with that too. And the cap is brilliant in bringing up. And quick shout out to you, Greg. Bernie Williams is Army George's favorite baseball player, so props to you. Kind of on a social level, though, I mean, I think it'll be like the Jordan Bulls. I know from when I was a kid, my mom would give me Bulls stuff. Her being from Chicago, my uncles would send it out to us. So I'd wear like a Gimme 5 in 1997 or some Michael Jordan shirt or whatever it was, and get crap for it. And just remember that from the outsider's point of view, as you put it, just kind of, I'm sick and tired of seeing them winning, yada, yada, yada. But now you look back on it, and you look back on the 97 Bulls and what they did. And you look at it with that look of nostalgia, but also just that look and that air of greatness. And I think because of that, and because of the salary cap point Matt brought up, we'll look back on this, 17-year run and if it continues going, because Tom Brady wants to basically play until his robotic arms fall off.
Right.
We'll look back on it and just see, we'll love it. I mean, our kids are going to ask us what it was like watching it. And kind of to bring back the baseball point, I remember there was a commercial about Albert Pujols, of all players, of, your dad will tell you about how he got to watch Hank Aaron. Your grandfather got to tell you about how he watched Babe Ruth, whomever. And you can tell your kids you watched Albert Pujols. You get to say that about Tom Brady. We get to say that from an outsider of getting to see Tom Brady and watching that and just remembering hating him and just having, sports needs a villain at some point, and having that and the one person and one team that you love to hate, everybody aspires to get to, kind of both sides of the coin. I mean, right now it's, Patriots versus the world, but we're all going to look back on this run whenever it ends and, look back on it with some big eyes of nostalgia, if you will.
Yeah, no. And for me, I think the thing that's never talked about, but everyone just says or thinks, I should say, is the fact that Belichick has been doing this as the GM. It's almost like a Red Auerbach, and I tried to look outside of Boston to think of a comparable, but Red Auerbach, when he was the GM of the Celtics and the coach at the same time, and created this team that won 11 out of 13, 11 whatever in a row, and he really changed the game in terms of getting Bill Russell and guys like that. But also as a GM, he would make these deals that there were no rules at the time to prevent them, but he would also, they created rules after the fact, and that's similar to what Belichick has done, with all these different rules that the NFL has created to basically try and stop what the Patriots are doing, and on field rules and off the field rules. And it's just one of those things where I think Belichick doesn't get enough credit as, he's a great coach. Obviously that's been proven, but his job that he's done in talent evaluation, as well as a GM, in terms of not overpaying for guys and almost to a fault losing some of the superstars. Like Matt said, defense, they don't have these superstars, but yet somehow they're back in the Super Bowl because they have guys who are serviceable and guys who get the job done that need to be done. And that speaks to the GM talent, I think, of Belichick more than the coaching.
Yeah. It kind of, no, you make your point, because mine's out of the box.
That's a point that I heard. So I brought it up before, like Brady is the greatest of all time, but Brady would never have the amount of Super Bowl rings that he has, and the amount of consistent mean, their worst season, the last time they missed the playoffs, they went 11-5 with Matt Castle at quarterback and didn't make the playoffs, which made no sense anyway. But you're right. That's a great point, Greg, because name their biggest superstar other than Brady on that team. I'll give you Rob Gronkowski. But after that, I mean, who really on that team is a lockdown, bona fide, poster selling jersey kind of guy? There just aren't guys like that on that team. They just find these guys every time they sign a player. They signed Chris Hogan. They signed Rex Burkhead. You just know they're going to be good there because you know somehow Belichick has figured out why they make sense in his system. And they're like, it seems like now that he's got misses. Albert Haynesworth was a big miss years ago, but you don't hear about them. All you see is the success they've had with guys that come from nowhere, are drafted in the 6th or 7th round, or are picked up on strange free agent deals that you're like, wait, why did they sign Chris Hogan to a 5-year deal? Why did that make sense? Well, he's been highly productive for them. I think it's incredible what he's able to do and the gems he's able to find throughout the league.
No, and you're right, and it's funny because he has had some misses, and up until this game, everyone's saying that Gilmore was a miss, but he turned around and had some unbelievable plays late, and the only other guy, superstar on the team that would have been Brandon Cooks, but I don't think he ever got the chance to have that superstar status because he left the Drew Brees system and came with Brady and the Patriots and sort of fell into that. Whoever is open is going to get the ball. It's not necessarily the best player. So,
but he quietly had 100 yards last game.
Right.
Like
exactly. And that's something that I think again it goes back to the GM deals of Belichick. But we can move on to other things. I just wanted to get an outsider's perspective because for me personally, it's obviously I'm respecting and loving it going on and not complaining, but I'm tired of people in New England and Patriot fans sort of, not to generalize obviously, but just sort of talking about how everyone hates the Patriots for no reason. And I just wanted to get a perspective as to what outsiders we're getting. And I think Matt put it best in the first comment he made, that it's just annoying. And the fact that those, like you said, the Dolphins and the Bills and the Jets have been virtually irrelevant in the NFL since 2001 has been the best point, or the proof is in the pudding, if you will, with that. So
right. I think the example I'd give is, so you brought up the Chicago Bulls. Well, the Chicago Bulls blocked a very amazing Utah Jazz team with Stockton and Malone from ever winning a title, and they've done that to the Patriots have,
and Patrick Ewing.
But yeah, so they've literally done that, right? They've done that to teams that deserved a title, and the Patriots have done the same thing. And now I know the Colts finally got one, and but I'll give the example of the Colts. Peyton Manning was unbelievably good, and he only has, with the Colts, 1 Super Bowl ring. Like, to me, that's incredible, because when you think of his legacy, he should have 3 or 4 Super Bowl rings for how good he was, and consistently.
He almost didn't get it.
Right, right.
The Patriots. Sorry to bring it back. Sorry to bring up a wound, Greg, but the Patriots blew a lead in that game the year the Colts finally won.
Yeah, dropped a fourth quarter. Dropped a fourth quarter play. Kevin Falk out of the backfield, but Matty, great point again.
My point I was going to make, kind of just out of the box, was, again, you kind of brought it up, Greg, of just changing rules and everything, and it's almost a good way to segue out. But they Tiger-proofed it, if you will, topical reference, as he's coming back to Torrey Pines. But and Tiger's kind of we all look back, and there were the people of literally Tiger versus the field, of the people who either loved Tiger or hated him, and then all this personal life stuff happened. But now, we look back on it with these nostalgic guys, and now we're all hoping that the comeback happens with him coming back this week in his first real tournament. You can say what you will about the Bahamas, but just another example of, guys once in a generation type talent. The Patriots have 2 of them, and a coach and a quarterback. Tiger obviously being that for golf, but it'll be fun. We'll talk about this obviously a lot more for the Super Bowl next week. We'll probably go through some prop bets as well, which are some of my favorite things to look at for the Super Bowl. But now with the Eagles in it, it feels I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if I'm going to be able to enjoy the commercials.
Right. Well, I won't be watching the commercials, but we'll talk about that
later. We'll talk about your business trip that you'll be going on in a week and a half. But let's move on. We'll start, or you guys want to move on to basketball or a little hockey?
Whatever works for you guys. I mean, Flyers are on right now, actually. Shoot, I haven't checked that score. Does anyone know?
Yeah, I haven't checked it either. They're playing the Red Wings. Let's do a little basketball, then we'll finish up with hockey with the All-Star game this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just jump right in with basketball. They announced the All-Star reserves today. I think for some reason a lot of Philly fans thought that Ben Simmons would get a nod. He did not, and I didn't expect him to be honest with you. So he does not get in. Other surprises? I mean, surprises. Chris Paul, Paul George didn't make it this year either. I think the injuries to Chris Paul probably derailed that. Personally, I hate how it's kind of this weird little club with the All-Star game. Like, you have to have certain players in the All-Star game. I don't like that. That bothers me. So I'm happy that Chris Paul didn't make it because I don't think he's having that great of a year because of his injuries. Well, he's a great player, and I think he's going to potentially get out of the Warriors. So I'm probably not going to watch a lot, but I always like to see who they choose. But I did want to point one thing out and get your guys' opinion on this. So there's a team with 2 All-Stars, and Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins of the Pelicans. Are they All-Stars? Because their team is terrible. So, like, what are you guys' thoughts on in the NBA, particularly, like the stat stuffing that occurs by some guys and how they just get All-Star nods because of their great stats, and yet their teams are mediocre at best?
So that was going to be my question was, is it like the NHL where everyone has to have a player represented, or is it?
No, I was wondering the same thing. I'm looking at it now. It doesn't look like everyone does because there's only 12 players on the or 13 players on the team. No, 12. Yeah, so that's impossible for them to even do. So multiple teams have them. Obviously, the Warriors have 2 Warriors.
Yeah, and that's the toughest part, I think, right there is to go back to Matt's question is the lack of people on each team, you know, because your NBA teams are already small, so becoming an all-star and talking about these young talent snubs across the board, that's just going to happen all over the place, and it's one of those things where that's why they do the rookie sophomore challenge, because they know that they want to promote their young stars in that type of game or that type of environment where those guys can shine and not be overshadowed by LeBron, who jokes around, and Steph Curry, who tries to dunk, and all this other BS. But yeah, I mean, it's a valid point talking about 2 guys, and DeMarcus Cousins and Anthony Davis, who, you know, are really, you know, Cousins obviously with the media headlines and Anthony Davis with the fan vote. But it's one of those things where, are they deserving because they're popular, or are they deserving because they should be there based on their team record as well as their individual record? And that's, for me, I'm always a proponent of, you know, in order to have individual success, your team should have success as well. And that's like Victor Oladipo with the Pacers. Right. You know, he really has led that team to be in contention in the East and the 6th seed right now, and it's because of him, despite losing, you know, everyone that they lost in the offseason.
Yeah. For me, at least, and I agree with it, the team success, at least though for Anthony Davis, if you had to go and kind of get somebody in, I'd put him in over Boogie, especially just Boogie kind of with his off-court stuff. Anthony Davis, the unibrower, I mean, just the eye test, like you were talking about with Nick Foles. I mean, he just looks the part. I wouldn't necessarily put him in as a starter if I had my druthers, but I'd throw him in there. But the Oladipo point, though, it's great on your part, Greg. Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking over the rosters now because I did not check them out before we jumped on. The Bleacher Report's not going up, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting that they don't go baseball style and try to overload these rosters, but that's I guess, like you said, that's why you have the rookie sophomores game for the long weekend of skills competitions.
Yeah, I would also mention this, and this is why I think, and I'm not a huge LeBron fan, but I respect the hell out of him. So everyone talks about how great Anthony Davis is, how great DeMarcus Cousins is, some of these other young players out there. But LeBron James wins where he goes. So his team, regardless of who's on it, has success. So whether it's leadership, intangibles, defense, when he plays on a team, they win games. And he did it with Mo Williams and the Cavaliers. So what impresses me with a guy like that, and I'd put some other guys in that category, he drives his team to victory, however it's necessary. So I'm always impressed with Davis and Cousins and some of these other stat stuffers, but guys like LeBron, and now he's the greatest of all time, but if you want to be as good as him, you've got to show that your team can win with no talent on it, because he did that in Cleveland before.
That's a really good point.
So, yeah, I struggle. I mean, it's like Carmelo Anthony used to make the All-Star game all the time. And I'm like, well, his team's not even good. You know, like just because he scores a bunch of points, like he should be in it. So struggle with that.
Well, and it's like Kevin Love now. You know, Kevin Love is obviously on the Cavs, who are, you know, having a so-so year, but he also is just a star name on a team that has LeBron on it. You know, is he really deserving over someone like Deion Waiters in Miami or Hassan Whiteside in Miami, who's having a great year and they're
I was going to say Hassan Whiteside, big snub there.
I think injuries probably hurt him a little bit.
Yeah, that's true.
Hey, how about John Wall? I mean, he's having a terrible year. Even for his,
that's a really good point.
So, and yet he's on the team, and we're going to snub a guy like Paul George. Well, they're the wrong conference. I think their problem is the Eastern Conference is filthy.
Pretty
low. The Western Conference is filthy loaded, so they're struggling with that.
I mean, and I was just sorry to interrupt, but I was just reading something about how the coaches are the ones who actually coaches poll are the ones who choose the reserves.
Right.
So 7 from each conference is how I just read it, but. So for me, it's like even more. The coaches should be the ones who don't pick guys who've been injured all year. Like Kyle Lowry, I don't think has played a ton of games either for the Raptors. Again, staying.
Yeah, he's been in and out.
Yeah, staying in the East of these teams or these guys like Matt said, who just are there because of their name versus guys who are deserving or, you know, what have you. I mean, isn't there a guy in the Bulls who's having an unbelievable year and like the reason why the.
Yeah, Lauri Markkanen,
maybe. Yeah. But like Andre Drummond's been having a very successful season.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm surprised there's no Pistons on this.
Yeah. So I just, you know, how about Kemba Walker now? Maybe that's a guy that you think stat stuffs. I haven't watched enough of his games to truly see how he affects games. But I think it's, you know, like I'm picking on him pretty hard right now. But watching DeMarcus Cousins meander back on defense, that's not an all-star to me.
No.
That's just not a guy that I think should be in an all-star game. I know it's all about points in the all-star game, but I mean, I don't know. I just think it's kind of a shame.
You're right.
And it's a great way for and I know there's the rookie sophomore game, but it's a great way for some of these guys to show up and get their brand out there. So,
well, I mean, they were saying last year too. I mean, they said that the best thing for the Celtics last year, in the All-Star game, was the fact that Brad Stevens was the coach, so that he could interact with some of the stars, if you will. And it's one of those things where I think the NBA solely picks players so they can have that star attractive. You know, they want people to watch, and that's why they're changing the format this year to have draft teams and all that stuff. And I mean, let's call it what it is. No one's going to watch an All-Star game unless it means something, like the MLB game, and even that struggled with ratings for so many years. So
and it doesn't even matter anymore.
Right. But that's what I'm saying is, like, this is a chance, like Matt was saying, for some of these young guys to learn from some of the stars, you know, like Oladipo, to get a chance to get in front of LeBron's face or learn from a guy like, you know, Klay Thompson or Steph Curry or even Embiid, you know, Joel Embiid, who's been having a great year, to learn from Al Horford how to play in the post or something, you know, how to do something on a practice or an all-star type situation where you can interact with your fellow NBA guys on a, you know, you're not competing, you're out there to have fun level. And that's something that a lot of these guys are denied the chance because of this silly format they have.
Yeah. That's why I'm kind of surprised they don't put it to everybody needs to have at least one person and make it like a larger roster, at least like, or maybe even across the number of different games that you have, to try to have all of that exposure. Because that's one thing about the baseball all-star game, that you see all the camaraderie and all that going on throughout the 2 days that their all-star break is. And the NBA all-star break is 3 days because they have all the different stuff going on. So a little bit of a surprise, or not a surprise, but there's definitely some snubs. And I'm sure as we look through it more, we can think of others. But I mean, on the Bucks, how about the Jason Kidd firing? What do you guys think of that?
Well, I mean, I think, I think that's another team that they're a young Milwaukee Bucks team. They've got some talent, but I think he had some weird late game decisions, that I read about. Some strange. He was fouling guys while winning, which don't make any sense to me. Make a guy make a shot. But I think it's another thing where the owner jumped the gun a little bit. Really, that organization believes they should be going after a number 1 seed, which I just don't believe is the case yet. They think they should be with this, the Celtics and with the Cavs and even with the Raptors. So I don't know if I totally understand it. And, their star, the Greek Freak, went to bat for their coach, wanted to save Jason Kidd's job. So that was strange. That whole thing was strange to me. And they did it while Giannis was injured, which was weird as well. So I don't know, strange world the Milwaukee Bucks live in, I guess. But sometimes you gotta let something settle like that.
No, and I definitely don't think it definitely doesn't make sense, because you're talking about a team that was a playoff team last year, a team that, with a couple more wins is a 3 seed, if you will, because they're only 3 wins behind the Cavs. So it really, it's like Matt said, surprising, shocking, and one of those things that just doesn't make sense at the time, because a team that clearly has been playing well for him. My only fear, especially in this day and age, and everything that's going on with, you don't have to get into it, but there's got to be something behind the scenes that either is going to come out about the relationship with Jason Kidd and the owners, or the Jason Kidd and the GM, or maybe something in Jason Kidd's personal life, because there's from a coaching standpoint, it doesn't really make sense.
Right. Yeah. I get that. Once again, now the only positive is maybe the Bucks are realizing what the Sixers realized, and they've got a superstar, but the only way you're going to win now in the NBA is if you have a whole bunch of stars, apparently. So you gotta pull the process motion out. But they're farther along than that for me. So that kind of, I don't know. It just is so strange to me. Greg, I haven't thought of that point. That's a really good point, that maybe there's something going on that we don't know yet with the relationship there. He also, remember, he left the Knicks as the coach and wanted to go to the smaller market Bucks, which was strange. So, the whole thing I think is a little weird. I would agree.
Yeah, pretty crazy stuff. Any other basketball things? Any other basketball topics you guys want to talk about?
Yeah, I finally saw how Embiid can take over a game when the Celtics and the 76ers played this past week. Granted, Kyrie wasn't there, and it was an 89-80 game, which probably the lowest scoring game in NBA history in the last 5 years. But it was good to watch in terms of when he turns it on, or when he can take over a game. And I understand they want to save him in his minutes and all that, but at some point you got to let the kid go and just let him control and dominate an offense like he did, where the ball should go through him every possession, in my opinion.
It went from a minutes restriction to a minutes suggestion this year.
Yeah, I think the one concern I'd have, and that's a great point, because he, to me, he's the whole key. When Ben Simmons is on the court without Joel Embiid, there's a huge drop-off in what they do.
Yes.
And so now, once again, Simmons is theoretically a first-year player, and he's a rookie. I didn't play last year. And the other guy that I thought would share a lot of the ball handling duties, Markelle Fultz, hasn't played, so it hasn't looked good. So I don't want to put too much of a burden on Simmons for that struggle. But man, Embiid is a one-man, wrecking crew right now in terms of, if the ball doesn't go through him, they're in a little bit of trouble. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's been a tough. So then I watched the game last night against a bad Memphis Grizzlies team, and I watched us implode in the fourth quarter. Way too many turnovers. I know we're a young team, no JJ Redick, and that's a big loss for a team that could use his veteran leadership. But that's the bad Sixers. But I'm okay with that, because that's the learning curve a good team goes through when you have young players.
Yeah, to put it in perspective, 10 of their, I think it was, the final number was 32 turnovers came in the fourth quarter, and the Bucks scored, I forget the number of points they scored in the fourth quarter, but there was, of, let's call it 30, only 8 of them were not off of turnovers. So, they fly the ball around, and Greg and I have talked about this a little bit. They try to fly the ball around and really get the ball moving, and it's almost that opposite of what you're talking about. And even if Embiid's involved, they try to thread it a little bit, almost those Simmons-esque passes, because he has just that keen eye for it, but get a little too fancy at times. And you saw that last night. You saw a little bit of the yips from TLC a couple times where it looked like that the Grizzlies weren't going to let them blow the lead, and the Sixers came right back down the court and gave the ball right back.
Well, no, I think it's. I mean, we talked about it a little bit last week. It's this team. The fact that they are so young, it proves that, like, you know, especially when they play the Celtics. Obviously, I've seen them in limited action, but they just blow leads against the Celtics. And even without Kyrie, the Celtics were, if they had hit a couple 3-pointers, that game was tied, and the Celtics probably would have won. So, like, it's you know, that ability to step on someone's throat when you have them down. That closer, that finisher, that late in game, you know, who's
Monster
getting the ball? Who's getting the ball? Who's getting the ball if they need a game tying 3 or a game tying or game winning bucket, if you will? And that's sort of something that's going to develop over time, and something that the 76ers definitely need to figure out sooner rather than later, especially heading into the playoffs.
That's where I'd like to see Ben Simmons get a little more like a little more aggressive. I'm not a fan of ISO basketball, but he needs to be. I don't care what they want to do. Somehow there's got to be a play in the game that they just know that they can go to late in a game that's going to get them a bucket in close.
Yes.
They don't have. I mean, we all know they need shooters with Embiid on the floor and Simmons. They need guys that can come away from the basket. Now the problem is Redick and Covington, and I think Sarge is a little better in this, but Redick and Covington are basically spot up shooters at this point.
Yep.
Like whenever Covington dribbles, I get scared because he's just not a particular.
You saw it late in the game last night.
Yes,
he had a weird dribble out, and then he tried to do that fadeaway that he.
I think he thought the clock. I think he made a mistake. I don't think he knew that. Now, once again, as a young team, you don't realize what's going on in the game because Amir Johnson was standing on the sideline smiling in the replay, after he shot it with like you only needed a 2 guy. I mean, I think not having
and Embiid was right under the hoop too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you got to go to your guy. But you know what teams do? They just collapse on Joel Embiid late in the game.
Yeah.
And when he's really good, he's passing it out. He's kicking it out. He's allowing his teammates to get open due to his dominance. But, they're missing a piece. But it could be there already. Like, it could be Simmons getting more aggressive. I'm not giving up on Fultz yet. Sarge had a pretty darn good game last night. So they just need to be aggressive and take it to the rack. And that's got to be Simmons because – go to the rack and make the guy leave Embiid and do a little dish to Embiid. I mean, he's such a monster too. So, do they do the Simmons and Embiid pick and roll at all? Do they run that at all? Because
not really.
Right. Well, the problem is you just go under every screen on Simmons. You don't switch. You just go under because he's not going to shoot.
Yeah, and I think the biggest problem, at least what the Celtics were doing, was they had a bigger guy covering Simmons. So, like, you do pick and rolls with the big and the small, so you can get the small to match up with the big,
right.
and Embiid or Simmons is so tall that, like,
6'7".
Right. It's like LeBron and Embiid doing a pick and roll. You're just not going to get that mismatch that you want and need from that. So it's tough because Fultz really would help that out. Like Matt's saying, Fultz has a little bit more of a jumper than Simmons, but
he's starting to hit a couple.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's tough because, like, this, like I said, I'm only comparing it to the Celtics, but the Celtics had Morris on Fultz, and then they had Al Horford on Embiid, and those are the Celtics 4-5s, and you're not going to have a center and a power forward, go over the top on a pick and roll with Simmons. You're going to let him drive into you and try and stop him that way. So
yeah, exactly.
Right, and I would also say that so Simmons is 6'10", by the way, not 6'7".
6'10", yeah.
He's really, really tall. I never thought – that's actually a great point. So I don't know what the answer is, right? Because maybe Fultz isn't the guy. So there's got to be a guy, whether it's like a sixth man. Like, I'm not a big Lou Williams fan, but, man, him and Embiid possibly running a pick and roll excites me. So, I don't know who it's going to be. They got to get somebody that's not Jared Bayless or even TJ McConnell because TJ can't shoot. So once again, you just go under every screen. You got to have that triple threat who can pass, shoot, and score. We got to find that from somebody.
Yeah, TJ has one shot that he can hit like that, but it's one shot. It's come out from the lane, turn around, pop it up. But I mean, he's a hell of a defender. But yeah, the good news for the Sixers, at least coming down in the second half of the season, they have the second easiest schedule in the NBA because they by far have played of Eastern Conference teams the most Western Conference opponents, and subsequently the least amount of opponents in the East. So, I mean, hopefully they play well. They down to some of their competition, so hopefully they avoid that. I'll be there against the Bulls tomorrow, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Listen, before we wrap up the show, because I know Maddie likes to keep them short and we ran it long, but last one hockey quick thing they were talking about. No, they were talking about the expansion cities, and it's looking more and more like Seattle. Do you obviously, because they have the odd number, for those who may not know, they have the odd number now that Vegas has joined in the NHL.
Not just joined, owned the NHL.
Seattle is looking like the front runner. They've talked about a couple other Canadian cities. Where would you like to see the next expansion team be? City, one word answer, quickly go. Jordy.
Seattle.
I gotta say Seattle too. I think it's the best spot.
Runner up, Quebec.
See, that was what I was gonna say. I think they need another team in Canada. Yeah. But I would say Seattle as well.
What about you, Greg?
No, I'm going with the Canada point. The having a team out, another team in Quebec, or getting a team back or an additional Canadian team. It's just going to help the league with the international flair and all that. But Seattle would be good simply because you get that somewhat cold weather, and it is close, and they have that. Seattle fans are notorious, even with the MLS, they show up. So you do get that good fan base, if you will. But it's just, for me, there's too many teams already on the West Coast, and I think having another Canadian team would be the right move.
If you put it in Quebec or Hamilton's another name that gets thrown around, who'd you move back to the Western Conference?
Wow. That's a good one.
I gave away my answer with it. Detroit, I would move back.
I would. That makes sense.
Because they gave the bullshit reason of we want more of our games in the Eastern time zone, but you already play half of them there anyway. That's where Detroit's located. Mm-hmm. And you're not really adding that many more games by putting in the East versus the West. So and you lose the Blackhawks rivalry there, or at least multiple games against it. So I think it's the most logical pick, but
yeah, I'm gonna say I think the best option would be to add Seattle, and then I hate to say it because I hate ripping a team out of their city, but I think the Coyotes have to make a change, and they'd be the kind of team to move up north to.
Are they still owned by the NHL?
I don't know.
Have they been bought yet? Does anybody know?
No idea.
I don't think so, but my pick, Jordy, would be one of the teams in Florida because it makes sense. You have a bunch of Florida teams, NFL doing NFC, AFC things. So, right now there's 2 Florida teams in the East. Why not make it 1-1 and just, be done with it? Make it easy.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
To give them the Seattle Mariners treatment of just by far the worst travel.
Well, I mean, no, because right now you got in the West you have Nashville, and they're always.
That's a really good point.
Constantly traveling out. Give them another team that's somewhat closer in the area. But we don't have to go there, anyways.
Quickly before we wrap up, last point: the NHL All-Star Game is this weekend. What do you guys think is going to happen?
I think there's going to be a lot of goals.
Well, there haven't been a ton in this 3-on-3 tournament style. We've had
true
barn burners.
Well, no, it's funny because it's 3-on-3. It's all breakaways or it's all like in zone. Everyone's just covering one-on-one matchups. So breakaways, goalies have a pretty good shot at stopping them. But it's I'm excited more than I have been for this year. But I'm also really don't want to watch because I'm not happy with the NHL based on the Olympics and Patrice Bergeron not making the All-Star team. But that's my own Bruins Bruins point. But no, the 3-on-3 that's awesome, and it really is a nail. Like, you know, anytime the game goes overtime, 3-on-3, whoever it is, you know, it's must-watch TV, and you saw it even in the World Junior Championships. You saw that too. So it's one of those things where 3-on-3 is electric, regardless of when it happens. So I'm excited for just the edge of your seat type of deal.
Just like with TK's overtime winner against the Caps on Sunday, right, Matt?
Yeah, that was incredible. That was
awesome.
The game. You know, I would say that the shame of it is I always thought I really wanted I always liked the idea of amateur athletes in all Olympic sports. So, you know, you know, the NBA is almost not basketball in the Olympics is almost not fun because the USA just dominates everybody. There's obviously a little more parity in the NHL. Now that they've done it, I don't like it. Before, it's all I wanted. I was like, you know what, I want to see all the young kids playing for their country. But after hearing some of the like Ovechkin's desires to just really want to play for his country, I kind of now I'm back on. I wish they had the NHL players playing.
No, I'm of the opposite mind. I think you should send the best players, make it the best competition. Obviously, the steroid users get them the hell out of there, like the Russians, but not Alexander Ovechkin notwithstanding. But yeah, I mean, I'm super bummed the NHL players aren't playing, especially because I think just kind of Greg's point of the World Juniors, the U.S. is on the up and up, and I think in a couple years or a couple Olympics from now, we could really make a good threat in terms of challenging. But yeah,
well, no, I mean they were saying the biggest reason obviously is money and the fact that the Olympics didn't want to curtail to the NHL and Bateman being like, you know, we'll give you X amount of our profit shares and all this, you know, putting the NHL
is getting hurt 4 years ago. That's the
No. The real reason is money, Jordy. Don't get it twisted. You know, it's not injury. It's 100% money. It's all about the fact the NHL wanted to put their logo everywhere and they wanted to share in the revenue.
That too.
They wanted to take the money from the Olympics that the Olympics was getting and NBC was getting, and they wanted to collect some of that of their own, which is why he went out and created the World Cup or whatever that was this summer of hockey this past summer that they had. So
2 summers ago.
So it's the same World Baseball Classic. It's the same reason. It's all about you know, the fact that the NHL and the MLB want the money from the Olympics.
Yeah, but at least with baseball in the Olympics, that's tougher to do just because of how condensed the baseball schedule already is. The NHL, I mean, I get your point on that. When I meant Jonathan Tavares getting hurt, that's just dollars the Islanders lost from him being hurt. So they also have that IP, if you will, of in terms of dollars. But we don't really need to argue it that much more. It's certainly a bummer that the NHL players aren't going, but yeah, I mean, it'll be exciting to at least pay somewhat attention to it because it kind of keeps it wide open. But you know, I guess we will at least have pro hockey to still to watch.
Right.
Hey,
Well,
listen,
you know what,
fellas.
there's so many things in the NA, and there's so many good things in the Olympics other than hockey. Though I'm still really excited for the.
Yeah, I am too. We'll cover that on another pod, though.
Fellas, listen, I got one thing to say. Maddie, I hope you have a great weekend, Super Bowl weekend. I hope it's awesome. I hope you come home crying in a negative way, though. But I hope everything else is awesome for you that weekend. Go Pats. And, you know, as much as I pull for Philly in getting their first ever Super Bowl ever in their lifetime, go Pats, and let's solidify the GOAT status, if you will.
Well, obviously, I'm hoping.
I respect it.
I respect it, but I'm hoping to the opposite. But I think that's going to do it for us. Anything else you guys got for me?
No.
Go Pats.
Go Pats. One quick final question that I just thought of because I mentioned it before. Give me one word. Where's Tiger finishing this weekend?
He makes the cut.
12th.
Ooh. Yeah, I was going to say like 30s.
I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I'm hopeful too. He looks pretty excited. Greg, I've told Matt this. My dad has a bet over under Tiger Majors at 0.5. Would you take it?
Majors, yeah. For the rest of his life?
Yeah, for the rest of his life.
Yeah, 100% I'd take it. And I don't know, Matt, I don't know if you know this, but Jordy's dad and I have an unspoken feud or rivalry, if you will, that goes back to high school for no reason. But I take it, and then I would get him when Tiger wins a major on the senior tour.
No,
So
it's a
not-
regular
not
tour.
now.
It's regular tour.
No, I know.
Well, the
But you
story
didn't
of
specify.
Greg.
Listen, Jordy, you didn't specify that, and neither did your dad.
I love it.
Which is why I take,
We'll
take
have
the
to tell the
Tiger.
story of.
I take the over. Maddie, if you want the story, Jordy could explain it. But
Yeah, well, we can
we
tell
haven't
that story
spoken-
another time. But I
we
think
haven't
that's going to
spoken
do it for
rivalry.
us, boys. I thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, absolutely. It's a great time.
No, listen, it's I'd say it every week, but really, really impressed. Love listening to Maddie, especially knows a lot, and Jordy does a great job doing his research and homework and everything, and knowledgeable. So glad I get to join and give
Love
the
having
little
you.
Patriot take, and I'm pumped.
Yeah.
You guys gave me some clarity on how the outside world views the Patriots. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
Well, I
just
mean,
like
depending on what happens in 2 weeks, this may be your last podcast ever. So you better watch out.
yeah, like you keep. I was gonna say you keep us in check, so we had to return the favor. But like I said, that's gonna do it for us this week. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. For my guys, Greg the Prophet Piatelli, Matt the Truth DeStefano, the fake Matty D. I am Jordy Cannell. Have a good night, everybody. Take care.
Go Pat.